As a kid, I watched this movie and it was about an old man and a boy going on an adventure with a house that floats with balloons. What a fun, childish movie, right? But now I watched this movie today and damn, it was intense. It was no longer about a fun balloon adventure, but instead it was about a man that lost the love of his life too early, thinks he failed her for never getting them to their dream location, and now tries to keep his promise by doing the trip alone, but with his wife's spirit still by his side. It almost sounds like I'm talking about two different movies, right? Now, I'll get more into the adult versus kid experience later, but in general the movie was definitely still enjoyable even 15 years later. As always with Pixar movies, you don't notice the age from a technical perspective, and the story is as good as ever. Obviously, there's nothing groundbreaking about the visuals from today's perspective, but nonetheless, it's still beautiful. The only things I really noticed is that this balloon looked kind of weird in this scene, and that these two glasses were out of metal instead of glass. I'm guessing because it's harder to animate fluids in real glasses, so they kind of took the easy route there. But it's really not a critique, but more to show you that the animation is still flawless. I mean, a balloon in a glass, it's nothing.
Ellie is so beautiful.
The story is really what makes this movie special, and the story as a whole is great, but what I truly found special is actually the story they managed to tell in 4.5 minutes. It's the story about the life of Ellie and Carl Fredricksen. Did you know that Pixar actually started by making short films? Their very first short film came out in 1984 and was called Andre and Wally B. They used these to hone their craft and experiment with different animation techniques before they moved on to feature-length films. And oh boy does it show here. With this movie it almost feels like they had the idea for this short story first and then decided to make a feature-length film around that. It's simply amazing how they managed to get you so emotionally engaged within a matter of minutes. And for the rest of the movie, that means you already start with such a high emotional engagement where other movies only manage to achieve such emotions at the end. This movie has it at the start. And because I already watched this movie as a kid, when I just heard this score kick in at the beginning, I already got goosebumps. This score is then used again and again at every emotional scene throughout the movie, so at the end it's really burned into your brain. And that brings me on to my top 3 scenes in this movie, because the first one is without a doubt the short story. It almost feels rude to call this a scene, because it really stands on its own and would be beautiful even without the rest of the movie. As I already mentioned, this short story is phenomenal. There's no dialogue, no action, and it doesn't need context. There's just great visuals, a great score, and an emotional story. Actually, when I think of the movie Up, I first think of this short story and then about the rest of the movie. My second favorite scene is dogs being dogs. In this movie, the villain has tons of trained dogs, and they do create a real sense of danger and threat, but Pixar manages to just sprinkle in that little bit of humor every so often to not ruin the overall tone, but still make me laugh.
Who wants the ball?
There are so many scenes like this where the dogs break character, so to speak, and go from being a villain to simply being hilarious. And it's set up right from the start that although they can talk, they're still dogs.
It's smart master, and he made me this collar so that I may talk. Squirrel!
My third favorite scene is Russell on the porch.
Ah!
Hi, Mr. Fredricksen. Please let me in.
No.
Just the fact that he actually said no. It's one, hilarious, and second, shows just how much Carl wants to be alone and how little he cares about anybody else. He lost his wife and is now on a solo mission, and the rest of the world can go to hell basically. Of course that's sad, but it's a great place for a character to start the movie and grow. When talking about this movie from an adult's perspective, I feel the need to point out that I am a young adult. Yes, the themes of Up hit harder even for me, but I can't imagine how emotional the short story must be for somebody that actually lived through similar circumstances, with their loved one dying way too soon and then living alone in the house and city you used to spend every day with them. I got emotional imagining that, but I'm sure this will hit harder the older you get. As a kid, I remember that this was a fun movie. A house floating with balloons was exciting and talking dogs were amazing, but I didn't remember it as anything outstanding. It's only after having watched it again now that I feel like I truly understand the entire spectrum of this movie. I would almost go as far to ask the question if this movie was actually made for kids. As I like to mention in my other 2024 analysis videos, Pixar is great at making a movie seem like a kid's movie at first glance, and of course they are enjoyable for kids, but if you actually go deeper, this movie touches on things a kid can't possibly grasp or understand. The house represents baggage. We see Carl all throughout the movie dragging that house behind him, while it's slowing him down and getting in the way of forming new connections. It's Carl trying to hold on to his old life, and it weighs him down. It's only once he realizes that his old life, the house with Ellie, was beautiful, but whether he wants it or not, this life is now over. And it's only after he lets go of his old life, his house, that his new life takes a turn for the better.
You know, it's just a house.
It sends the message that important people will leave your life, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Some can be replaced, and others simply can't. But that doesn't mean that you can't form new meaningful connections, and that the end of one chapter in your life can mean the beginning of the next adventure. Did you get that message as a kid? I definitely didn't. Another aspect that I really enjoyed, which is great for all the kids and young adults out there, is that it gives all of us some perspective on the life of the elderly. Of course, not all older people are grumpy, but as we all know, some of them are out there. And when you see them, it's so easy to just see an old grumpy person and nothing more. But this movie shows us that maybe we shouldn't be so quick to judge, because I guess the older you get, the higher the possibility that something really bad happened in your life. And as we can see with Carl, he used to be a super happy, cheerful man, but then something really bad happened and he just struggled to get over it. So next time you see a grumpy elderly, before you judge, remember that in younger years they were maybe just like you, and who knows what they've been through. Overall, I can describe this movie very easily, and I only need one word: perfect. Having already watched this movie as a kid and now as an adult, I can safely say that this movie is for all ages. And that's no small feat. Of course, the experiences were very different, but both enjoyable in their own way. I can't list a single thing that this movie should have done differently. So all that's left for me to say is, hats off to Pixar and everybody that worked on this movie, a true masterpiece. If you're interested in some more movie revisits, then check out this video about watching Cars 18 years later. Otherwise, let me know your thoughts on Pixar's movie Up in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.